Lawyers of Reddit, what is the nastiest, craziest divorce case that you've handled? I worked for a judge. Two prominent local news people had a divorce. They filed mutual restraining orders against each other for violence. The filings were vague on details, but still somehow conveyed a sense of Shiloh or Antietam levels of blood. When it came time for the hearing, it turned out the violence was spitting. More specifically, during a heated argument, flecks of spittle managed to touch the other party. Judge denied the restraining orders, and both parties' attorneys probably bought new yachts. Such is justice. I was a secretary for an attorney. I think the most entertaining one was when a guy had to divorce his wife via newspaper because she wouldn't leave the house or answer the door for the process server. My first divorce case was the most memorable. My client was a nice-looking, 50-ish waitress who was breaking hearts at the local small-town cafe. She was on divorce number 5. I had a little lawyer kit of things she should do: clean out the joint accounts, change the car title, etc. She had done all of them, plus a few things neither I nor the professional list maker had thought of. Husband no. 5 came into my office to cry and concede everything. Now that was a guy who needed a lawyer with a list. No such luck. She ducked him over gently. Professionally, I thought, didn't overreach too much, but got everything she was or might have been entitled to, plus a little more. Was easy peasy for me. Helps if your first time is with an experienced woman. I learned a lot. My parents' divorce was finalized September of 2014. But the separation of assets is still opened. The short of it is that my dad has always been really jealous. About 2 years ago my dad got it in his head that my mom was cheating with a Baker police officer in our hometown, Mexico. He hired 2 guys to watch her 24/7. They confirmed that she was cheating and said they had a video. Well, $8,000 and my dad's sanity later. There's no video and my dad is mentally ill. He hired someone else to hill this Baker police officer. Thankfully they too just took his money and did not hill him. He started going to brothels and sexually harassing women. He said he would leave my mom on the streets and has attempted to pay off judges. My dad was always a good hard-working man. Now he is someone I don't know. Some say it's a midlife crisis, but the guy is 65 years old. I feel if it was a crisis it should have happened years ago. TL. Dr. My dad thinks he lives in an Colombian novella. I just had lunch with a lawyer friend of mine and he told me this crazy story. When he was an intern there was this divorce case where the woman was demanding her husband for child support. It was in a small city in Bolivia's highlands and both the husband and wife were shepherds. Anyways, the husband asked the judge for a medical examination of his genitalia. Turns out the husband was actually a woman. She was raised by her grandparents and they respected her preferences. For the rest of the community she was a boy. After her grandparents died she inherited the land and after some time the neighbor offered her to marry his daughter, without knowing the guy was actually a girl. She accepted and once she was married she came to an agreement with her wife. They will be married but they won't have sex. After a while the wife got a lover and had 3 kids. The husband took them as her own. Some years passed and the relationship got really deteriorated so the husband asked for a divorce. Things got ugly and she ended up telling the truth in order to avoid paying child support. Here's a story of a potential thwarted divorce case. Told to me by our closing attorney. Man and his fiancée are buying a house together. They get to the paper where you sign off on all your aliases. The woman has a full page of former names. The guy asks, "What is this?" The woman nonchalantly says, "Oh, I've been married 5 times before." The guy gets up and walks out. Needless to say they did not buy the house or stay together. My sister is a divorce lawyer and I remember she once told me about a case she handled where the wife kept cheating on the husband with younger dudes and one day the husband had enough and decided to beat her repeatedly and sent her to the hospital. My grandparents' divorce. I refused to help them with it or get involved. I think my only advice was to burn all of their possessions. It was truly awful. It went on for at least 4 years. My grandfather was a shopping addict and hoarder, and step-grandmother left the minute that they ran out of cash. They then proceeded to fight about every object in their hoard, all while both being in the middle of dying. She was dying of cancer and Alzheimer's, and he of diabetes and kidney failure. So it wasn't like they had some grand plan about how someone was going to use any of these objects. They owned basically nothing of actual value. My grandfather was just awful and wouldn't let her go. Did she know she was leaving? Not sure, and wrote her nasty letters weekly. After my grandfather died, my family threw away or donated virtually every last hammer, hat and book they fought over. What a waste of time and energy their whole divorce fiasco was. I'm sure they greatly annoyed their respective attorneys greatly. Far back on Reddit I saw a thread where the guy lost his house in the divorce but kept few lined around it via some loophole. First he had all the trees logged and sold. Then he had the stumps ground and mulched. Then he sold the topsoil. He sold off the gravel. Then he sold off the clay until the house was left on a hill surrounded by rock. If someone knows the thread, please link it, it's great. Getting my counseling license and taking legal ethics classes. One crazy story is while a lady is in her counseling session, her husband comes in and says to the receptionist that he's her husband and he won't be able to pick up the kids because he has to go into work right then, and could the receptionist let the client know when she gets out of the appointment. The receptionist says yes. When the client comes out of her appointment, the receptionist passes along his message and the client says, "Are you serious? He isn't supposed to know I'm here. We're in the middle of a divorce and he's crazy." TL. Doctor train receptionists to say I can neither confirm or deny that person is a client. Not a lawyer, but I'm sure the divorce lawyers for my parents could write a lot. Both my parents are stubborn and often irrational. For example, my dad accused my mom of being a negligent parent for giving me chocolate chip cookies. My mom accused my dad of breaking into her house to replace my antidepressants with sugar pills. I had a weird childhood. My sister works at a family law firm. Some lady was divorcing her husband, and after the mediation he called back the next day saying he was going to kill her and everyone at the firm. So I'd say he handled it well. A man came into the family law firm my friend was working in and says his wife was cheating on him. He's extremely rich and wants to get divorced. The lawyer proceeds to ask him about his assets and what he wants to keep. He says that she can have the house, the car, the boat, the kids, etc. The lawyer asks him what he wants to keep then. Given that he doesn't seem to want anything, the man angrily responds that she only loves her dog. "I want her to suffer, so I want the court to order that the dog be taken away from her and cremated. She can have 50% of the ashes and I'll have the other 50%. Somehow this prince among men is getting divorced. And despite the crazy, somehow I'm still interested in practicing in family law. Someone in my family holds a state record for longest divorce proceedings. 30 plus years of unrelenting fighting that divided the family into who talks to which parent. Complete with long periods of not speaking to one another and family members not speaking to the people who won't speak to the family members that they like. The reverse too. Some people talk to the mom and some talk to the dad. But you can't talk to them both. Not allowed. God forbid you ever mention one to the other. It's a war and it totally ducked their kids, my mom and aunt's uncles, up. It won't end until both parties are dead and in the ground. The husband in the case broke into the wife's, our client, home, poisoned some of her food, and left. She went to the hospital and ended up being perfectly okay, thankfully. I didn't handle the divorce, but I was working in a legal clinic and had a client seeking a protective order from her ex-husband. We had an initial interview and I got paperwork filed. Between filing and the scheduled hearing, she called me. She started rambling, and when she calmed down, she told me her ex had been arrested for murdering his brother, even with bigger fish to fry. He insisted on attending the protective order hearing while in custody, which is his right but a terrible idea because anything he says on the record can be used by prosecutors. He shows up in his prison jumpsuit and handcuffs and takes every opportunity to talk about how my client would get drunk and start fights with him and he had to give her a slap to shut her up. He's currently serving a life sentence after being convicted of second-degree murder and several other felonies. Divorce attorney here. The standard comment I make is that I represent good people in their worst moments. However, some cases seem like representing the worst people in their worst moments. I have a bunch of anecdotes. But the truly surreal case for me was a post-decree case. Was a husband sought reduction of his unallocated family support obligation after he was fired from a six-figure salary as a public school principal. He was jerking off in his car while driving and was observed by most of the people in a school bus that was much higher than his car. The legal issue was whether his change in employment was in bad faith. After a 3-hour hearing, court felt that it was. Day 58 of the 60 days it took for my parents' divorce to be final. My dad called my mom at work and begged her to call it off and take him back. She said no. He went from sad and crying to pissed, saying, "So this is how you want things?" About an hour and a half later, my mom got another phone call from someone letting her know that our house was on fire. It was arson. Of course. I wish that's the worst I could say about their divorce. Not a lawyer, but saw what happened to my cousin. He got married at the start 1 year. During the year ended up needing surgery. Gets home and wife has left and taken all the stuff including the dog. They both owned a house each, but his was worth slightly more, so she made him pay her the difference in the settlement. But as a happy end to the story, he's now married to a lovely woman and they have 2 kids together. Yes. Finally my moment to shine. A mother, a citizen, who took her child from Argentina and ran back to the US, child born in AR. I represented the Argentine father husband. Federal court. Argentine government got involved. Made the news in Buenos Aires. We won and had child returned to father in Argentina. Also represented a woman who was convinced that her husband had implanted micro robots into her brain and was trying to control her. She would bring us all these nanotech articles trying to convince us that it was possible. She dragged the case out for 4 years, convinced that he has done all kinds of illegal stuff, like destroyed her car brakes so she would crash and putting poison into her tap water. She was nuts. We almost had to get a conservator for her estate. Told this one before, but it bears repeating and is also pretty crazy. At least in my opinion. I'm a land use and real estate lawyer. But a friend's friend is, or at least was, a divorce family lawyer. My friend once told me a story wherein my friend's divorce lawyer friend was attacked by a client's former spouse while doing his grocery shopping at a local supermarket with his wife and kids. The former spouse attacker has blamed the divorce attorney for taking him to the cleaners and for the downward spiral that followed the divorce. Last I heard, the lawyer who was assaulted in the grocery store decided to change practice areas. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Criminal lawyers often work with the worst people on their best behavior. Family lawyers often work with the best people on their worst behavior. Not strictly divorces. But my family law professor had some good stories. Story 1. Client calls, "Hi. Can I kick my pregnant girlfriend out of the house?" You really shouldn't do that. But can I? Legally speaking? Since you never married. And the home is in your name. Yes. You can legally exclude her, but you really ducking shouldn't. Thanks, I need you to explain that to someone. Client opens door. Where police are getting ready with a ram. Hands cell phone to police officer. Story 2. Unmarried mum comes in and asks, "So, what do I have to do to get his house?" You really shouldn't be getting married if you're already planning to end the relationship. Yeah? But what do I have to do? Well, if you're married and live in the home, it become a matrimonial home and you have an equal right to possession upon divorce. Double quote. Thanks. Client calls again. He wants me to sign a prenup. Well, this would limit what you would be able to get in a divorce. And it doesn't really give you anything. Why are you getting married if both you and he know that you're only in it to get his house? Okay, so I should sign it? Comma. Client calls again. Okay. We're married now. But he won't let me move in. Family law is crazy. A guest speaker in that course was beaten up by thugs for a ruling he made in a high-profile arbitration case. I had a few. One guy had his wife served with the divorce papers while she was in the hospital undergoing cancer treatment. She had no idea he wanted a divorce. One guy wanted a provision in his divorce that said his sons couldn't watch NASCAR because the wife's new boyfriend was into NASCAR. In the same case, the property division was so contentious that the judge had the parties list every piece of furniture in the house and try to work through who would get what. The guy made sure that he wanted everything she did. Down to things like lace doilies her grandma made and some trophy she won in a women's shooting competition. I bought her the gum, so it's pretty much my trophy dart. Another guy wanted no custody and no visitation with his 4 sons until he learned how much child support would be. Then he wanted full custody with no visitation for the wife in the hope that she'd have to pay him child support. I only did divorces for about a year before I moved on to mortgage foreclosures. Those are far less depressing.